Have you ever found yourself changing who you are to fit in? Brené Brown, one of my favorite social scientists and best-selling authors, says the research shows that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. Fitting in is changing who you are based on your assessment of others and thinking, who do I need to be? What do I need to say? What do I need to wear? How do I need to act? And true belonging never asks us to change who we are. It demands us to be who we are, because if we fit in because of how we changed ourselves, that's not belonging. You betrayed yourself for other people, and that's not sustainable. In today's episode, we'll dive into the research behind belonging, and we hope that it'll help you begin to have the courage to let go of who you thought you should be in order to fully be who you are. Welcome to Tell Me More and Then Some.
I'm Alina.
And I'm Angeline.
Join us as we dive deep into the topics that fuel our conscious evolution and keep us learning as students of life.
We invite you to come along and share the ride. We hope you're empowered to learn and grow into the best and most authentic version of yourself. We're so happy you're here. Let's go. Brené Brown has a really powerful quote stating, "You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness." She studies human connection for a living and has one of the most viewed TED Talks in the world called The Power of Vulnerability. I highly recommend it. She states that when we fit in as opposed to belong, we're acclimating to the situation instead of standing for our authentic selves. She defines belonging as the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So many of us long to be part of something real. We're wired for love, we're hardwired for belonging. It's in our DNA. Connection is why we're here, and it gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Alina, how does that resonate with you?
I think we can all think of an example relating to perhaps believing in something or sharing something with others because perhaps you never felt that way and you think that perhaps something's wrong with you, right? So I think for me, growing up, I vividly remember all of my fabulous girlfriends really having the desire to be married and have a family. They wanted children so badly, and most of them got married in their 20s, a handful of them in their early 20s. And I was thrilled for them, but I also kind of always had this voice in the back of my mind going, I don't yearn to have a family. I don't yearn, like it just wasn't what I was interested in. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of went along with it. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to get married and have a family too someday. It's not something that I voluntarily talked about, but if somebody asked me, it was like, oh yeah, sure. Because that's what you do. And I just never, it definitely never, it was never an interest.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I do wonder what you think it was that made you go along with it, quote unquote, and not being honest with others.
Shame, perhaps, or not fitting in, or I think a big one was, well, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Am I missing speaking of DNA, like, is there a gene missing? Am I broken? Right. Like, I have a uterus. I have like estrogen and progesterone, flooding through me. Why don't I want the same things? And then when I would voice things like, well, I don't know that I want to have a family. Mm-hmm. I'd get comments like, well, that's not normal. Or, well, of course you're going to want a family. What kind of woman doesn't want a family? That's not normal. That's just the natural progression of life. And I would say things like, well, I'm very grateful that there are women that want to have a family because it's what makes the world go round. And luckily, not every woman is like me.
Right.
But yeah, I think it took me a long time to get to that point where I was like, you know what? I'm done playing this game. It like people would try to set me up with friends or people that they knew or introduce me to someone, or you'd go to a wedding and, oh, you're next.
I remember hearing that.
It's like, geez. And yeah, it's really nice to be at a point in my life where people don't necessarily say that to me anymore, because I think they're like, oh, we've given up. Like, she's lost cause, maybe.
Is that why? Could it be that you just show up with a different energy of accepting yourself, and it might be resonating and coming off to others?
Oh, I like that.
I feel like there's a part of it that's that.
Maybe. Yeah, my energy is just different.
Yes.
And I own it.
Yes.
Like, I'm confident and I'm like, listen, this is it. Like,
right.
I'm not having this conversation with you guys anymore.
Yeah. I mean, just part of that quote was standing inside your story. Like, you're standing and owning it.
Yeah. Girl, full circle. Yeah, I think so. I like it.
I love it.
I'll go with it. So many of us, when we think about belonging, we think of times we were excluded, but we'll need to risk the discomfort and criticism that can come with being who we truly are, our real selves, in order to feel belonging. Belonging to yourself first, speaking your truth, telling your story, and never betraying yourself for other people, allowing ourselves to be seen and be vulnerable. So where might this come from? I think it actually makes a lot of sense. In our primal days, if we didn't walk around in tribal garb, you stood out, and you didn't want to because everyone would see you as a threat and they would outcast you. If you weren't part of the tribe, you most likely wouldn't survive. And our brains have truly not caught up to the fact that there isn't an animal chasing us. There is no like fight or flight response required as it relates to this, you know? And so from an evolutionary standpoint, I think we're still catching up, right?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Can you think of a time where that applied to you, or
Oh, yes. Yes. One of the times I would say that it really sticks out for me was in high school. My family moved from the city of Chicago. We moved to a suburb, and I started freshman year of high school not knowing a soul. And, you know, I was very insecure at that time. Obviously didn't really know who I was, which I'm sure is a lot of us. And so I didn't make friends. I kept quiet in my bubble. It was a very painful 4 years, I would say. My only sense of home was being at home with my sister. And it wasn't until college when I met a friend who was one of my closest friends, and she came from a similar background as I did. And she had an immigrant family. She was first generation American. And that was one of the first times that I felt like, okay, I'm not really ashamed of who I am, and I can genuinely feel this connection with this person. And then it kind of unraveled, but in a good way, from that, in that we found our friend circle, found our tribe. And I didn't feel like, you know, what our tribal brains have told us. I didn't feel like I was outcast. And, you know, it went up from there, and it felt really nice to not have a pit in my stomach in going to school and not feeling like anyone wants to even like look at me or be with me or be friends with me. It was hard.
Yeah. And finding that one person, I think we underestimate how important it is to just find that one other human that we can relate to. And I think this can also connect to media and representation, right?
Oh, right.
Like when you're young as a child and you're watching television and you're a little Black girl, but everybody on TV is white, there's no you cannot have a sense of belonging. There's
Right.
no relatability there, right?
Yeah.
And so I do love that in the last recent decade, really, you have a lot more representation.
Yes.
So that as a little girl or boy watching a show or whatever, listening to a musician, anything, you can look and say, I'm not alone.
Right.
There's someone that looks like me. They have hair like
Yeah.
me, and they're doing something great with their lives, or they're doing something that I want to do when I'm older. And I can do it because somebody already did it, right?
Yes.
It's a similar.
That's a really good example, actually. They kind of, they see that there's a place for me in this world,
Right.
you know?
And I think you found that with your friend.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, wow. There's someone with a similar background.
Yeah.
Similar story.
Right.
And then it just sort of grows from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just felt myself opening up, right? And, you know, we all have a lot of stuff from our childhoods. And I just felt like, okay, I kept opening up slowly, and I was accepted and I was loved for it. And it just reiterates in your mind that, like, you are worthy of being here, of belonging, of love and connection.
Mm.
And it's just such a beautiful experience when you get there. So guess what prevents us from being vulnerable? Shame.
Mm.
Our fear that we're not worthy of love and belonging. And what we typically do when we want to fit in and protect ourselves from rejection, abandonment, criticism is we armor up.
Mm.
We put on the mask, and what that armor is, it's not showing the emotion or the pain when somebody hurts us or makes us feel less than. It's honing in on our perfectionism and preventing ourselves from feeling joy, which I think is a very interesting one because it's not something that you'd naturally think is part of this armor, but joy is very vulnerable.
I agree.
Because you could lose it. And it all stems from fear, which is a natural response. And it has its value because it feels safer and like no one and nothing can hurt you or shame you or judge you or mistreat you. Armor is a conscious choice, though. So ask yourself, am I self-protecting right now in a way that moves me away from courage, my values, and being who I truly am? Understanding that emotional armor is characteristic of people who have suffered intensely, it makes sense that they don't want to experience that. It's the protection they've chosen to avoid getting further hurt and broken, and it's a response to their need for a safety mechanism. And while emotional armor does protect us from many painful things, it's important to know that it can also prevent us from being seen, and it is a way to essentially deny our humanness.
Mm.
So as much as you think it's protecting you, it's also protecting you from feeling that belonging.
Yeah, I can definitely I can see how that would resonate with a lot of people, right?
Yeah. Have you armored up? I feel like we've all probably armored up, but
yeah. And I think for me, this is definitely a topic that I love and I'm really passionate about because as a teenager, I experienced a lot of loss. And every time somebody passed away, I just felt such a deep ache. And when I was 14 and my dad passed away, it was just the most unbearable pain I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. And I just thought to myself, I'm so tired of this. I don't want to feel this anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And my 14-year-old self convinced myself that if I armor up, if I don't get too close to people, then I won't feel this kind of pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so I did just that. I literally said, okay, 14-year-old self, going forward, when something happens that hurts you, you are going to say to yourself, nope, it doesn't hurt. And that eventually your brain would follow. And then after your brain follows, your actions will follow.
Yeah.
And I did this constantly.
For years?
For years. I just did it. And sure as shit, I built, like, I didn't even know what like neural networks were, obviously, at the time.
Yeah, it'd be a little strange.
I was a neuroscientist in the making. But no, I truly, I trained myself.
Yeah.
I trained it, and I developed these neural networks, and I would make friends. Like I never had a hard time making friends.
Right.
So I'd make friends, and then I'd get a little close, but not too close. Then I'd back up. And, you know, I remember a great friend of mine, we're still great friends. She would say, you were hot and then cold, hot and then cold. I never knew, you know, which Alina I was going to get, because it's like if we went on a great trip together or something, you had your moments. And then like when we got back, you'd disappear for weeks.
Wow.
Things of that nature. And so anyhow, I think, yeah, what you said, you know, it definitely makes sense.
Oh, yeah, it does.
We're in constant pursuit of protecting ourselves.
Right. Because you don't want to feel that pain anymore. So you thought that was the best way to move forward. And
yeah, I think just thinking about ways in which you can get through it, and some ways in which I certainly got through, or not even through it, but just worked on getting past it, was acknowledging and peeling back the armor. And it took time.
Yeah.
I always think the amount of years that it took me to build the armor, I would say it took the same amount of time to take the armor off, if not more time, right?
That makes sense to me.
And it starts with believing that we're enough, and believing we're enough gives us permission to take that armor off. And we need to acknowledge the fear. We need to work through it. We need to fully embrace our inherent worthiness. And it happens with micro changes in our behavior, which includes displaying compassion, humility, patience, and gentleness towards ourselves. I think we forget to be gentle. And if you start paying attention, you'll find that all humans are longing to be seen for who we truly are, including all of our flaws, all of our traumas, insecurities, and fears. And it's liberating when you start to really get to know the uniquely beautiful soul within you, and no longer have to try to hide behind a facade that many of us show the outside world in order to belong. It's choosing to acknowledge, for example, when a friend hurts your feelings, telling them that really hurt me, that really hurt my feelings, and not fearing that they'll abandon the friendship, because in doing so, you're being true to who you really are, with the understanding that you are worthy of love and acceptance. And you're not fearful that the friendship will end because you're not agreeable, or, you're not bending to please others, especially when it doesn't serve you.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people, there are so many people in this world that probably hold back from saying how they feel because of those fears.
Yeah. Can you think of an example?
Let me see, what would I categorize this as? I think it would be, there was a lack of feeling worthy to be loved, excuse me, for so long because of a lot of my insecurities.
In friendships or?
In friendships, in romantic relationships, especially in romantic relationships. And I didn't know for so many years I was self-sabotaging, and, if I leave them before they leave me, I won't be hurt. And I can't let them get too close, similar to a lot of like what you were saying about your friendships. And so it wasn't until I met my now husband, Andrew, that I learned to soften and peel back the armor, as we say. And I remember vividly when we were dating, there was a moment where he was out of town and called me. First of all, called me versus texting, which threw me off. And he said something like, "I miss you." And I had a response that was very like standoffish and like, "We'll be fine. When you come back, we'll get sick of each other." And he actually paused and said, like, "That really hurt." And he was the first person to ever say that out loud. And like, I didn't even realize what I was doing. And so I really appreciated him saying that, because it led me to respond with, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I said that." So
that's so not who you are. I remember that. Didn't he say ouch?
yeah, ouch. Yes,
Yeah.
he said ouch.
And like, you're such a warm, compassionate person that I can't even picture you saying that.
Yeah. I turn into like, it's like Jekyll and Hyde almost, I think, when there's that vulnerable like moment.
Yeah.
I don't even know who I become. Like, well, this is also in the past. I think I've really worked through it.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point in my life, I thought it was just me that did all this, but no, I know we all go through it.
And do you think it took someone like Andrew to be vulnerable with you and to
Yes.
call you out and keep you honest?
Yeah.
And that's why the relationship worked and continues to work.
Yes.
Or one of the reasons.
I think it's a big reason. I think he's also really good at not only calling me out, but helping me realize my worthiness, or loving me through all of my insecurities, my flaws, right? There's this line that people say, like, you know, in order to be loved, you have to love yourself first. I have a hard time with that. Like, I get that you have to love yourself and have this sense of worthiness, that you are worthy of love. But I genuinely believe that a lot of our healing can also take place while we're in relationship, right? Whether it's a friendship, platonic, romantic. So I think he's just really helping me to accept and love all parts of myself, particularly the ones that are really hard for me to accept. So yeah, I think it's a combo of him, his vulnerability, his, ability to call me out, and making it feel safe. So
yeah. And this kind of like the example I gave earlier around a friendship, but also like as you guys continue to evolve, and in any relationship, romantic or not, that continued discovery of the other and those micro moments of, oh shit, I know I have this, where I'm like, oh shit, I just shared this really intimate thing about myself, or this really perhaps weird thing about myself.
yeah,
But you still like me.
yeah,
You still love me.
you're still here.
You're still here. Okay, this is safe.
Yes.
Okay, this is okay. And I think that continued evolution,
Yeah.
I think it can go on for years and years. And I think that's where the good stuff is, where you can say, oh, we've been married for X amount of years, or we've been friends for X amount of years.
And we're still learning about each other.
Correct.
Which is what you're
and
saying.
we're still
Yeah.
loving one another.
Yes, through it.
Because this is who we are, and this is who we've chosen to spend our lives with and our time with. So
I love it. Yes,
do
I very
too.
much appreciate him. So I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes on vulnerability. So it's, how do you start a quote? Quote, vulnerability, the last thing I want you to see in me, but the first thing I look for in you. End quote. So, it's just a good reminder that everyone is walking around this world trying to find ways to connect with one another.
I love it. I love that quote. In the spirit of sharing quotes, I spent my entire teens and 20s thinking that love and belonging ultimately resulted in pain and suffering. So that's why I kept my distance in mostly friendships, really. When in fact, and I quote, "In the absence of love and belonging, there will always be suffering."
Oh, the irony.
Yeah. I mean, life really isn't worth living if you're not loving others and being loved as authentically as you possibly can.
Hear, hear.
And inevitably, you're going to suffer.
I know. Exactly.
Right?
Whether or not.
You're going to suffer.
Yes.
Regardless. And so.
Choose your hard.
Yeah.
As I like to say. Or choose your suffering. Which one is it?
Yeah, girl.
Yeah, girl. Well, as you know, we always like to end our episodes with something that's bringing us joy lately. I have not thought about this one, so I will go, but I still will go first because I'm courageous.
And I'm going to give you shit for telling me to go first.
I know.
So you better go first.
She said, she's like, I always go first. Well, you know, one thing that's bringing me joy is shopping at Costco. So I went with my sister last night, and she has a membership. I don't. And it's really a magical place.
As my sister says, it's the happiest place on earth. For all you Costco lovers.
I loved it. I got great deals on paper towels, toilet paper, food, frozen stuff. Like, it's just string cheese.
Things
like,
you didn't know you needed.
Yes. And so it's really bringing me joy now because I have like a fridge stocked. I have my pantry stocked. And that's genuinely what I'm happy about right now.
Good luck eating it all.
Thank you. Yes, that's a challenge. But, you know, I have help.
Yeah.
How about you?
As my dog Ziggy sits in my lap, I'll say
So cute.
Ziggy and his cuddles. He's gotten really cuddly lately. And he's 6, but yeah, I'm just loving that he just loves sitting in my lap and cuddling with me, and I'll be on Zoom calls at work and he just wants to sit in my lap.
He's your little companion.
He is. And honestly, he kind of calms me down.
Oh, there's research on that.
Yeah, like just being in my lap is very...
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. That's all we've got for you today. See you next time on Tell Me More and Then Some.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review to help us reach more listeners.
To learn more, make sure to follow us on all the socials at More and Then Some Pod.
Join us for new episodes every Wednesday on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Until next time, stay curious, learn more, and talk about it.